If you're searching or clearing a structure for whatever reason, you probably don't have the luxury of throwing bangers and moving quickly with multiple teammates. And in a patrol setting, the opportunity for you to even move quickly usually isn't there because the mission rarely supports that methodology. In the rare instances you do, there's a good chance if you have any level of skill beyond what you were shown in the academy, you're probably on your own. Which is why you have no other choice other than to be the most capable individual you can be. If being the most capable individual you can be is something that interests you, make sure you are subscribed somewhere down below. When I do get the opportunity to conduct CQB tactics at work, I'm basically doing one-man CQB because that's the reality of law enforcement out on the street. One thing you definitely will get the opportunity to do is open and close doors, also referred to as working doors. As with all tactics, there are general rules to follow, which are sometimes abandoned when it makes tactical sense to do so. Because every situation could be different, you need to make the best decision with the information you have at the time. There are a million different rabbit holes to go down, and I plan on going down all of them at some point. But for now, I'm only going to discuss the different considerations you should have when working doors. For instructional purposes, we are working under the scenario that there may or may not be a bad guy in this room. And if he is in there, we will assume he has a gun and he is waiting to hurt us because that should be the standard. With any tactics, you have to first determine what the goal is. Once we know what the goal is, we can start asking ourselves what the best way is to accomplish that goal. Because primarily the only thing we care about is winning lethal confrontations, the goal is usually adequate lethal coverage as soon as possible. Meaning we want to have the drop on the bad guy. That's really difficult to do when the bad guy is basically in a defensive position and he has more intel on you than you have on him or what he is doing. When working doors, the goal is to be as far away from the door as possible and prepared for the fight when the door comes open. The problem is that we usually have to do that with our hands. On most doors, you have two choices. You can work it from the hinge side or the knob side. Generally speaking, we want to work doors from the knob side because we limit our exposure in front of the door in order to actually put our hands on the door and work it. People often say, well, bad guys can just shoot through drywall. And that's true, but they usually don't. They usually shoot at the door when there's movement or as the officer's coming through the threshold. And if your mentality is they can just shoot through the drywall, what exactly is the alternative to that if I'm by myself or I have one other person with me who may or may not know what they are doing? So when I have the opportunity to work this door, as you can see, I have limited space behind me, so I have to be right here. I cannot pull back any further. If I had the opportunity to move back further, that would be preferred, and how I would situate my feet is a little bit further back and I would lean closer to the door. So as I'm working the door and I begin to work the door, once I pull back, I'm already in the position I want to be in rather than being choked up on the door, opening the door, and then having to backpedal backwards. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna signal to my partner a motion like this, telling him I'm ready to work the door. He will acknowledge that he is also ready, which means he is preparing himself for a gunfight and preparing himself to look into the room and try and get an angle as quickly as possible. Once I signal to him and I get a head nod, you have really two options. You can open the door quickly, or the preferred method is to try to covertly work the door. You have nothing to lose by doing that in this situation here, because if he starts shooting at the door when I'm doing this, well, none of us are near the door when he's doing that, so that's okay. So we don't lose anything there. The other reason you might not want to throw the door open is because inside of this room leads to a bathroom, which leads to a pretty big closet, and he could be in there, right? So if I'm doing this, well, now he knows we're in here and we're coming, and maybe he could start preparing himself. So there's no reason to make as much noise and throw it open quickly. And they call this letting the door breathe, right? So we're just popping the door open just slightly, letting it breathe, giving it a few seconds, and then acknowledging again to your partner that you're ready to work the door. When you reach down on the door, different thresholds and different door setups can be slightly different, but the first thing that you want to do when you grab a hold of the doorknob is you want to pull the door in towards the frame, because like with this door here, there's a lot of play. And if you start working the door like this, there could be noise that you don't want to happen. So reach down, grab the door, pull it towards you, towards the frame, turn the knob, and then you want to move the door just so the latch is beyond the striker plate. Once I am in that position there, we're letting the door breathe. He's still ready for an engagement if that happens. Now, in this case, it's not all that significant because I'd have to be here, but preferably what I always do, regardless of the side of the door that I'm on, instead of using my hand and take my hand off my gun to push the door open, I just use my foot. And that's a lot more advantageous because, again, If I'm further back, I'm even more prepared and further back away from the threshold. When the door comes open, I have two hands on my gun rather than having to reach down and do one of these. So that would be working the door from the knob side. Again, your other option is to work the door from the hinge side, which isn't ideal because we have to spend way too much time in front of the door overexposing ourselves to the potential threat area. However, you may have to do that because there may be a wall, a balcony, a piece of furniture, or even a threat area that direction that we haven't cleared yet, and we have made the decision that it is safer for us to work the door from this side. Now, when we work the door from this side, we don't want to spend a lot of time at the door, because if I'm trying to do what I did on the knob side, which is remain covert, then I'm spending way too much time in front of the door. And if he is in there waiting for the door to move and he starts shooting, that's not good. We can get away with that on the knob side because we're not exposing ourselves to the door when we are doing that. Even though we want to work this door quickly and pop the door, we still don't want to throw the door open as fast as we can. Because now I have to assess everything in this room all at once, where if the bad guy is waiting to see an officer, he just has to get lucky and I have to be right, and he's probably going to get rounds off before you do if he is actually waiting for that to happen. You also don't want to be stacked up on the door when you work the door, because it's going to take you longer to get to a more advantageous position. So just like we did on the knob side, position your feet accordingly so that when you work the door, you can pull back to the position that you need to be in. For me, I have to be just inside the threshold, but depending on your height and your ability, your reachability, you may be able to be farther back. But for me, I have to be just inside the threshold. So what I'm going to do, reach across, pop the door open, the door is cracked. Just inside the door, I can see that there's a dresser and I cannot see anything inside the room at this point. So what I'm going to do, instead of coming up on the door and pushing the door open with my hand, same thing like we did on the knob side, I'm going to reach over with my foot up on the gun, get the door open, and now from here, I'm collapsing the room down from the outside, and I'm not stacked up right here when I'm doing that. If you have an opinion, like most people do, let us know about it in the comments section. If you find value in this information and you want to support the brand, tap on the logo to subscribe to the channel.
118, so this is my family all over. I can't copy. I want family all over. We got crews coming.